Hello everyone, this is Mr. Martinez, and this is the lesson on the 10 theories of the fall of Rome. And I want to make sure that you watch this video and take your notes till the very end. There's going to be a special phrase that will be at the end that you'll have to include. So I know you'll watch the whole video. So let's begin. Your EQ, what are the major theories on the fall of Rome? Let's jump into this. All right. So the first theory that people talk about are the Barbarian Invasions. So barbarians are people from the north the Romans thought were uncivilized. Basically, the barbarians were mostly Germanic tribes, Ostrogoths, Visigoths, and so on, that began to trickle down into the Roman Empire and basically nitpick at them. Eventually, garnering strength, the Romans had to push back to win some battles against them. But they just kept doing it over and over again, and eventually they were able to not necessarily conquer the empire, but when the empire had split, the eastern side didn't really care anymore and left them to succumb to the barbarians. While the Roman army was away from the borders, the barbarians were able to enter the empire, and this is what began to happen often. So, number one, barbarian invasions. 2, decline in morals and values. Crimes of violence made the streets of the empire unsafe. If your empire civilization is not safe, it's going to be difficult to be successful and to prosper. So this is very important when looking at the decline of Rome. Emperors wasted money on fancy parties. They just spent money that was coming into the empire. They were not producing anything. And this caused people to be in the empire to be upset and disgruntled. There was a passion for cruelty, gladiator fights to the death at the Colosseum. We have sports, we have things that we watch, but for Rome, it was to a level that we have never even attained in our societies. We've come away from that. The people of Rome became selfish and only concerned with what they wanted. It was all about me and not about caring for others. They were very selfish. And this would lead to a lot of internal issues that would lead to the fall of the Roman Empire. So, number 2, decline in morals and values. Yes, believe it or not, the Romans had environmental problems, but not what you're thinking of. For the Romans, it was the fact that all the utensils in cookware were made of lead. And lead, as we know now, is very dangerous to the human body. Actually causes craziness, and will eventually lead to your death. So some people think that ingesting too much lead poisoned the people and destroyed the empire. They felt that this caused people to go crazy because all their pots, their pans, their drinking things all had lead in it. And ingesting all of the lead, people think they went crazy. Okay? Yes, I said crazy. So, not necessarily environment. The Romans are very clean, very, they cared a lot for cleanliness, as seen by the Roman baths and how their aqueducts flushed all the sewage away. But this was mostly their eating habits and what they ate on that caused them to succumb and eventually possibly led to the fall of the Roman Empire. These are theories, not all of them. They could be true. They could just be theory. They could just be things that fit the facts. but it is important that you understand what they were. Excessive military spending. Maintaining an army to defend the empire was very expensive. The Roman Empire was actually a paid, their army was paid, paid in salt, which I'll get to when we get to ancient Africa. This left little money to take care of roads or build public housing. Emperors were forced to raise taxes on the people. And no matter what society you are learning about, not one of them was in favor of raising taxes. Taxes take away from the resources of the people of the empire and or countries, and most people do not like that. Even if you get, as it says here, roads, public housing, and such, it's still not the best way for a government to fund its expenses. And this is a debate that is still going on today. Whether or not you take tax money for social programs, what have you, it is the people's money. And most people want to keep it and use it for what they want to use it for. So in Roman times, the same thing. The emperors had to raise taxes to pay for everything going on. Inferior technology. During the end of the empire, scientific achievements were limited to building roads, bridges, and aqueducts. Nothing new was being invented and led to decline. And an empire has to be doing something, has to be creating. And as we saw on the video about the Roman Empire, they weren't. They were just conquering and taking in. They weren't giving out. The only thing they gave out was, as it says, roads, bridges, aqueducts, the things that Rome is known for. But at some point, it stopped. They weren't inventing anything new anymore. And this may have led to its decline. Inflation. Not tire inflation, by the way. Once the Romans stopped conquering new lands, the flow of gold into the empire decreased. Yet they were still spending more than they were taking in, and consequently, taxes were raised, and this hurt the empire. When you have no money coming in anymore, then things start to cost more, and you have inflation. That's where inflation comes from. Sometimes it's man-created arbitrarily, i.e. printing too much money so the value goes down, or not enough coming in, and things cost more because they're rare. Okay? It's supply and demand, simple economic theory. Things will cost more when things are rare. So number 6, inflation. 7, political corruption. Wow. Rome did not have a good system for choosing new emperors. People would lie, steal, cheat, and kill to become emperor. And over a 100-year period, Rome had 37 different emperors. 25 were assassinated. So up until the United States of America, this was the prevailing way in which governments continued, either by family line, or someone would kill, take over. There was a coup d'etat. Our system, we elect the executive branch, which in this case would be the president, and our founders actually made it even more difficult to have complete control, in that it had us elect electors, the Electoral College, so that every part of the United States mattered, not just the more populous parts. This is very important because you'll hear this many, many times. The idea of getting rid of our Electoral College and going solely to a popular vote. But the founders didn't want that. They made it outside the hands of the populace, simply because the populace can be wrong at times. Majority rule can be a detriment to a society if the majority is wrong. And because of this, every state matters. Every state has electors based on the populations. But you need every state to win. If you win the popular vote in every state, you will win the presidential election. If you win the popular vote in the largest states, you're not going to win the presidential election. You need all of them. And this was done strategically. Rome did not have this system. Consequently, it, after many years, could not keep up that way of being until it finally fell. It would go on in the Byzantine Empire, but that's for later. That's for the other lesson that will be posted shortly. So always have that in mind, that our system it's not perfect. There are things that can be improved, but it is done in such a way that no one has complete control, including the Electoral College. Every vote counts. Every state counts. And it has to be that way. Unemployment. Slave-owning farmers put small farmers out of business. And keep in mind that in this time period, slavery was different. It was based on the fact that you were conquered or you couldn't pay your debts. It could have been, there were times where it was simply because a group was easier to conquer. But that's what it was. It wasn't like in modern times simply because people got them from a region of the world and paid for them. It didn't matter where you were from. If you were conquered, you could become a slave of the Roman Empire. Farmers who lost their farms went to the cities looking for jobs but could not find any. So, obviously, if you have to work your land and pay people to work your land, you're going to be at a disadvantage when other people don't have to pay to work the land. And this is what happened in the Roman Empire. So, unemployment. Urban decay. Most Romans were not rich, instead lived in tall apartment buildings. Yes, the Romans had apartment buildings. At one point, there were 44,000 apartment houses within the city of Rome. Amazing. If you couldn't pay the rent, you were forced to move out and live on the streets. And this happened to many in the Roman Empire, and this led to its urban decline. And finally, many historians believe that Christianity may have played a role in the fall of the Roman Empire because Christians did not believe in the empire and would not fight for Rome. How can you have an empire conquering if the belief system of the people in the empire is not about conquering, but saving people's souls? Christians believed people should be saved and not conquered. Thus, the focus of the empire changed. When Constantine, Roman emperor, converted to Christianity and established that this was a religion that was not going to be persecuted anymore, the motivation for the empire began to change. It was not about conquering, it was saving people. And many historians believe this is what led to the fall of Rome. Conclusion. The empire was split with two emperors, one in the east and one in the west, and this is what most believe is why the Roman Empire fell. It was split. And in the east, which became the Byzantine Empire, didn't really care about the west as much and allowed the barbarians to conquer lands that were once completely Roman dominated. The once great empire in the west fell in 476 AD, very important date. The Eastern Empire continued for 1,000 more years. And that is the Byzantine Empire, which we will learn in the next lesson. So, very important. Most people believe it was the split that caused the fall of the Roman Empire. As the east continued, the west fell in 476. Barbarians moved in, and the rest is, as you say, is history. It would be known as the Byzantine Empire with its capital in Byzantium, later Constantinople. Constantine picked Byzantium and later named it Constantinople, and the empire would continue for 1,000 more years. The end. And the phrase to remember is, "This is the way." Thank you for watching. Don't forget to take your focus notes and do the best you can to do well. Thank you.